Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
Financial Survival Network is presented to you by Regal Assets. Buy and sell physical gold and silver through your existing retirement plan, 100% tax-free with Regal Assets. If you want to include physical gold or silver in your existing IRA or old 401k, request your free investment kit, which was recently featured in the Forbes and Smart Money Wall Street Journal magazines. Call toll-free 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620, or visit regalassets.com. We're always talking about gold and silver confiscation on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. We're also very concerned about the Cashless society, which enables Big Brother to track every transaction that you voluntarily enter into. And who better to talk to than somebody who is a federal tax practitioner, just recently had an appearance concerning his belief that the U.S. government will confiscate all precious metals and use the IRS to enforce a cashless society, and believes that they're coming after barterers as well. With me now is David Selig of Selig & Associates, a premier tax representation and advocacy firm in my former home state of New York. And David, how are you today?
Hey, fine, thank you. Thanks for having me on your program. It's a real pleasure.
Likewise. And it's interesting that you're bringing this up from a totally different standpoint than I would as an attorney and a radio host, and most of the articles that I read about this subject, because they're written by, I would call them the gold and silver advocates. And you're writing it from a taxation standpoint, and your knowledge and your dealings with the IRS as well as state tax authorities. So what has led you to the conclusion that the U.S. is actually going to try to confiscate all precious metals?
Well, there is real value in gold and silver and precious metals. And the dollar bill is backed against a promise. And unfortunately, we have seen the purchasing power and the value of that promise depreciate mightily. And my feeling is we are one event away from a potentially terrible realignment. You look at the effects that Hurricane Katrina had on people individually, on municipalities, and the tremendous consequences it had on the receipt of revenues from the state and from the Fed. It was very deleterious to our economy. Most people paid short shrift to that. They just saw the images of various people suffering and such. The federal government right now has taken a terrible interest in barter-type exchanges that would certainly gold coins and bullions and such would fall under that rubric. Anyone who's interested can look at Topic 420 of the Internal Revenue Service or Publication 525 and see how narrowly drawn these rules are and the requirements for reporting barter exchanges. Many people don't realize that when you make an exchange, a barter, that there frequently is a taxable event. The Internal Revenue Service is very interested in people with gold assets and such, as perhaps well they should be. And the feeling is that if an individual does not adequately meet their reporting requirements, they could very well be charged under Section 7201, that's the provision in the Internal Revenue Code for tax evasion, and be quite literally divested of their assets. A recent case, an individual was forced to sell off his gold coins and tender the proceeds to the federal government for these liabilities that they had assessed.
Really? So there's an open hostility by the government to individuals owning gold, and you believe it's only going to get worse as the economy gets worse and as the dollar further depreciates. And it's interesting, even though you're an accountant, the words you're using to describe the situation, the inflation, loss of purchasing power, is very similar to what people in my sphere would use to explain the current economic crisis, which has been led to from a monetary collapse that effectively nobody wants to address.
Exactly. And I would say, Gary, I would like to be very clear. I don't know if we are right now at the level of hostility or animosity towards those of us who believe in the value of precious metals. Rather, it appears to be a sweet plum that is just within grasp to take. I would imagine the hostility, the animosity, the untrammeled rapaciousness would occur after an event that would either, whether it be hyperinflation or perhaps a startling and sudden decrease to our availability to purchase oil, or maybe a food or crop failure of some stripe, or an attack on U.S. soil, which heretofore has not happened, in the capacity or severity that I'm referring to, whether it be a nuclear detonation or perhaps a dirty bomb of some stripe, and all of a sudden, the system that is securely in place essentially comes apart at the seams. Now people are not willing to take a dollar, perhaps, and people who have something of real value will feel they are sitting pretty. At that point, the government may take a very, very aggressive approach that would put, the Act of 1917 or the Act of 1933 in the shade and actually engage in forcible confiscation. And there certainly is the framework within the existing body of law right now. The other thing that I am very concerned about, and I mentioned this to you previously, is the fact that the court now Supreme Court has several justices who openly will look beyond our sovereign borders to rely on foreign law when interpreting a decision or perhaps even a notion or idea. To that end, Australia, very recent history, had a law in place where they could take your gold and give you their paper dollars. Now, that fell out of favor in 1977, but it was only suspended. It was not repealed. It was not abolished. That law is still good. It could be revived.
Yeah, it wouldn't even have to pass a new law. All they have to do is withdraw the executive order or their equivalent of it to effectively put that in place. And one other thing I want to point out to people, because you probably aren't aware, but most countries in the world, especially in the Caribbean, have excise taxes. So if you bring gold into their country, you could pay up to 50% of the value of that gold to the government. The Bahamas has it. Many countries in the world have it. And I don't know if it was born of hostility towards gold or just a way for them to make a buck, because, when you're dealing with governments, it's all about the money, let's face it. But, David, the next point is, do you think that these measures, these anti-bartering measures, anti-metals measures, can they really succeed in a country of cynics and people who have complete distrust of the government from its founding in 1776? Who's going to go along with them anymore that it's your patriotic duty to impoverish yourself and dump your metal, give it to the government?
I like to believe what you're saying is so. Unfortunately, from what I have seen empirically and anecdotally, I believe that most people will comply and be put under tremendous pressure to do so, and that only those with the most firm and resolute conviction and vision will be able to withstand this type of pressure. You look at what we are doing militarily these days, and I say this from the vantage point of being a former Marine and having a son who was decorated as a young Marine in Afghanistan. So I don't want anyone to question my patriotism. However, we are not prosecuting this war to win it. I'm not entirely certain what we're doing over there. And yet, we're just going along with this. Families like my own, whose children have gone off and served, many of them are suffering in silence. You have more young men, and to a lesser extent women, being prosecuted for fictitious crimes that never occurred while they are wearing a uniform on foreign soil, and you don't hear a large hue or cry from the populace. Many things that if you were to, let's say, and I don't mean to sound like an anachronism, but if you were to take somebody from, let's say, 1943 or 1944 and say, this is what we're doing, they'd probably punch you in the lip. They wouldn't believe it. Yeah. But we've come to accept it. My feeling is this, sir, in a nutshell. It's very difficult to maintain objectivity when you're in the middle of it. It's easy to think it's not so bad. I imagine that, assuming the bottom does not fall out, in 25 years, 30 years, they will look back and say, this was the Great Depression. Right now, they're telling us it's mere recession. They'll say this was the worst crisis faced by Americans since the founding of the nation. So when you're in the middle of it, it's very easy to accept the propaganda, the spin, the prevarications.
Yeah, well, you raise an excellent point there, David, and that is that we are in the Greater Depression, as Doug Casey calls it. By any measure, the country is going through an economic meltdown, and it's only been disguised because of innovations like the EBT card, like transfer payments, Social Security, and as long as the dollar holds up as well as it has been, and that's debatable as well, but as long as it holds up, then it can be masked and swept under the rug. But once the facade of the dollar starts to crumble, then the obviousness of what you're saying, and I've been saying it for years now, for 3 years, but the total emperor has no clothes moment will occur, and that's what's going to be interesting.
Absolutely. Remember, those individuals in the former Soviet Union did not know that they were about to implode until they did. Even we were caught by surprise. And yes. There's a similarity, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're Joe Sixpack. You've acquired some gold and silver. What are you to do? What are you supposed to do to protect yourself, to protect your family, and to keep yourself safe from a government that has no limits upon its power any longer?
Mm-hmm. I would say the short yet comprehensive answer is to educate yourself, to sit down, think of the plausible threats and scenarios that you are exposed to, and then start to work on your plan. It is, this may sound trite, but, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. Additionally, for those of us who are collectors of one stripe or another, it is a good idea probably not to publish or broadcast this, even to people who you perceive to be your friends, because come that darkest hour, we really don't know where anyone's sympathies lie. And one thing I have learned in my practice defending and representing people before the government in conflicts that concern whether X amount of dollars were made or were not made or how to treat that is that people are capable of doing and saying almost anything. So I would say play it close to the vest.
Yeah, so don't talk about it. And probably if you can get some out of the country, not a bad idea either, as long as it's done in a sensible manner. And we're big on planning here because, like you say, if you don't plan to succeed, then you're planning to fail. And you need to have a financial survival plan in place. You need a personal survival plan, a family survival plan, and a community survival plan, because that's when it really hits the fan. That's all we're going to be left with. David, if people want to find out more about you, if they've got tax issues that need to be addressed, how can they find you?
Well, you can visit me online at truetaxhelp.com, or you can call me directly, 212-974-3435.
Hey, David, I want to thank you so much for coming on FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. If you want to listen to this interview again, as well as many others that we have, and get the latest aggregated financial news, the good, the bad, and the ugly, go to FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com, tap in, and don't forget, preparation means metals. It means going to PrepareWise.com, order up your emergency food, because who knows if there could be supply disruptions. While you're at it, if you're making a purchase, type in the discount code LUTZ, L-U-T-Z. And if you're having tax issues, financial issues, the government's coming after you for prior filings, David is the guy to go to. David, thanks again for being on. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure.
Likewise.